Hello, Barcombe, hello, Barcombe Badgers. Lovely that we can do this. Lovely that I can tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about a story that Jesus told about sheep and goats. About sheep and goats. Can I put them down here so that you can sort of see them? Yeah, I'm walking on the bottom of the screen. Sheep and goats. And it's a story that Jesus told. And you remember that when Jesus tells stories, they always have a little extra meaning to them. They're not just stories because they're the fun story. There's always a little bit of an extra meaning behind the sheep and the goats. And we're going to see that behind the story here is the question of why are you kind? Why are you nice? Why are you kind? Why do you do things? When somebody says, "Oh, can you help me with this?" and then you go, "Yes," what's the why behind that? So every now and then you do it, well, because you do it. Somebody says, "Can you help?" And you go, "Yeah, because I can help." So well done. Other times you do it because you think maybe there will be some chocolate for me in this, and you think maybe I might just get a reward, and so I will do this in the hope of getting a reward. Okay, sometimes that. Other times it could be because the person who has told you that you must do this is somebody of authority. Maybe they even have, like a soldier. I can't find my policeman's helmet. It's somewhere here. And so maybe it's somebody of authority. And so why do you help? Well, because somebody of authority told me to. So okay, that's an answer to why we do these things. Jesus invites us to think about this. He tells a story. He says, "One day, Jesus, I am going to be king of everything. And I'm going to come back. And when I come back, I'm going to judge the world. And we're going to separate out the people in the same way that a shepherd would separate out sheep from goats. We would separate them out. So there's me separating out a sheep and a goat. We'd separate them out. And I need to have a little pause at this point because in England, the way in which we keep sheep, here's a bunch of sheep, here's a bunch of sheep, here's a bunch of sheep. We keep them over here, and here's some goats, and we keep them over here. So in England, when we farm sheep, we farm goats. They are not, as far as I don't think they're kept in the same area. But I went to the Holy Land a little while back, and there I was driving. I wasn't driving. I was driven in a bus, and the bus stopped, and we got out, and mostly we got out in order to see a camel. This camel actually did come from Jerusalem, and everyone was taking photos of the camel. But I noticed that over to the side there was a shepherd, and the shepherd had a whole bunch of sheep. And then I looked at them and I went, "That's not a sheep, that's a goat." And so in his one flock, he had sheep and he had goats, and he had both sheep and goats in the one flock. Now you treat your sheep and goats the same because they eat slightly different things. Goats don't mind eating the rougher bits of grass and tuff that were there along that bit of, it's a bit like a bit of desert, really. It was quite rough territory, rough land. So the goats were eating those bits, whereas the sheep were eating the rather nicer, grassier bits. And so it kind of works quite well. They eat slightly different things, but every now and then you do want to separate them because sheep once a year they get their wool shaved off. So whereas I don't think goats do. And so you do separate them every now and then. This is why, but you keep them together, and every now and then you don't. So that's a normal part of how you look after sheep and goats in Israel, in the Holy Land, in the place where Jesus walked and talked and gave his stories. So that's the why. In this story, they're all together, you see, and Jesus says, "There'll come a day when I am king." Jesus, and I will come back and I will separate out the sheep from the goats. Just doing some separating down here so that I can carry on with the story. Now, back to the story. At this point, Jesus says, "I'm going to take the sheep and I'm going to take the goats, and I'm going to put the sheep on my right hand side. I don't know how this is for you on the camera, but this is actually my right hand. And I'm going to put the goats on my left hand side. And I'm going to say to the sheep, sheep, you are amazing. I love you. And I want you to come to my party. Here is my Christmas party hat. I want you to come to my party. I want you to come to heaven. And the sheep go, oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Why? And Jesus says, well, the thing is that now you have to listen to the language here. It's an interesting use of the word I and me. Whenever I, meaning Jesus, whenever I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. Whenever I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a refugee and a stranger and lost, you helped me out. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was in hospital, you came and cared for me. And the sheep say, we don't remember seeing you when we did any of those things. We don't remember seeing you. And Jesus says, yeah, I know, that's okay. He says, whatever you did for anybody else, even for the least person, you were doing that for me, for Jesus. And they go, okay. So the goats then come along, and Jesus turns to the goats, and he says, perfect. We're going to ignore that. And I'm just going to keep talking in the hope that somebody else will answer it, or the answer phone will kick in. So don't worry about it. Jesus turns to the goats and says, you will not come to my party. You will not come to my party. So the goats look a bit sad. I'm not sure if I can make these goats look sad. That one looks like he's smiling anyway. Okay, the goats look sad. And they go, okay, why can we not come to your party? And Jesus says the same thing that he said to the sheep earlier. He says, because when I was hungry, you did not feed me. When I was thirsty, you did not give me anything to drink. When I was in prison, you didn't come and visit me. When I was sick or ill, you didn't come and care for me. When I was a refugee and a stranger, you didn't come and help me. And so the goats say the same thing that the sheep said. They said, well, when was that? We don't remember seeing you. When was that? And Jesus says the same thing he said to the sheep. He says, look, every time you did not, in this setting, and did not help somebody, doesn't matter who they were, even the least of my brothers and sisters, he says, that was when you were not helping me. It's kind of as if Jesus was in disguise at this point, as if he was in disguise, and as if really what you could have done is you could have been helping Jesus. So if you think about every time that you're tidying your room at home, or if you're tidying somebody else's room at home because you're being helpful, or pushing the Hoover around, from Jesus's perspective, you're really helping Jesus because you're helping this other person. Every time that you see something simple, and you think of a simple way in which you can help somebody make their life a little easier, then that's what you're doing as you do this. A number of times we say to ourselves, well, why should I help? You see, and that's what the goats do. Goats do, why should I help? Is there anything in it for me? Am I going to get told off, like the Roman soldier bit we saw, or am I going to get a reward? What's in it for me? The sheep in this story, they just were nice. They just were kind, and they did not expect anything like this. They didn't do it for this. They did it because they could do it. All right, they went and helped because they could help. So this is a story where Jesus is inviting us to think about why it is we're kind, but he's also inviting us to think about how it is that we see people. Jesus says, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, he sees these people as being part of his family. And maybe we could see each other as being part of God's family. And that's part of what helps us to help them, maybe. But what I like is how he uses the word I and me in the story. He doesn't say, whenever you did feed someone else, he says, whenever you did feed me. So Jesus thinks of himself as being a bit like this person, like he's Jesus in disguise. And this is you helping Jesus as you feed the hungry, give them water, as you give them what they need in their help. The parable of the sheep and the gates. And look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye.